after considering all the evidence that was presented in both the guilt and the punishment phases, I'm going to assess your sentence at 2 years confinement in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice.
Breaking news on KVUE News at 5, a rare sentence handed down at the Travis County Courthouse.
You heard the judge sentencing Austin police officer Christopher Taylor to 2 years in prison for deadly conduct in connection to the 2019 shooting death of Maurice Da Silva at his downtown Austin condo complex.
Taylor faced up to 10 years in this case, but his attorneys had asked the judge to consider a sentence that did not include time in prison. The judge ruled that he was not eligible for probation.
Let's bring in KVUE reporter Malia Masamoto, who's been monitoring this trial for months now. Was in the courtroom today with more now. Malia.
Well, Quita and Brian, it was a big moment in the courtroom when Judge Dana Blasey officially made that decision that Taylor would not be eligible for probation anymore. We saw some motion coming from Taylor's family when they realized that he would actually have to spend 2 years in prison. Now, in the courtroom today, things were tense at times, and there were a lot of delays in hearing witness testimony. The court heard from 2 defense witnesses today, one APT detective, Brian Martin, who testified about a separate 2022 incident where an officer was stabbed in the neck at an HEB. Attorneys made the argument that that situation showed how things like this can happen in an instant and officers need to be prepared. The second witness was former District Attorney Margaret Moore, who initially declined to prosecute this case. But Judge Dana Blasey then ruled that she could not hear Moore's testimony because the two had worked closely together in the past, so her testimony ended abruptly. Now, Taylor's defense, as you can imagine, appealed this decision immediately. Judge Blasey did decide that Taylor could be out on bond while they are waiting this decision. And just a few minutes ago, all of them walked out of the courtroom. Maurice Da Silva's father was talking directly to Taylor. He was giving his allocution statement to him as we are wrapping up the day here at the courthouse. Live at the Travis County Courthouse, Malia Masamoto, KVUE News.
Thank you so much, Malia. And joining us now, KVUE senior reporter Tony Plohetsky. Tony, you have been following this case from the very beginning. How unprecedented is this sentence for a police officer in Travis County?
Is extraordinarily rare. This is believed to be the first police officer ever convicted in Travis County of an on-duty shooting, and now with a prison sentence that goes along with that. It is highly unusual, not only here locally, but frankly across the state and across the nation. According to experts who track these types of things, it is exceedingly rare for officers who use lethal force to ever be charged with a crime, even rarer for them to be convicted of one, and even rarer still for them to be sentenced to prison, as Officer Taylor was just about a half hour ago.
How important is this for the district attorney? He ran on holding police accountable in Travis County. This obviously is something he was speaking to when he did that. How big is this for him?
Yeah, I don't know that he would call it a victory or use that word, but to be clear, politically for him, he ran on a platform in the aftermath of George Floyd's murder in Minneapolis in 2020 of police accountability. And frankly, much has been made about whether or not his office could push a case against a police officer across the finish line. They've attempted several times. They have not gotten a conviction. They have gotten deadlocked juries. But to be clear, for his office and his promise of accountability, I think many people in the community, many people who have supported Jose Garza will see this as an example of a promise kept by Jose Garza and his administration.
Now, there's another officer, Officer Krisha, who's going to be going on trial for the murder of Maurice Da Silva as well. Will Christopher Taylor's conviction actually have any impact on his particular trial?
It is really important to note that Officer Carl Krisha was standing next to Officer Taylor, and they both opened fire on Maurice Da Silva in the Spring condominium complex. Much attention has been on Officer Taylor because it was the second time in a span of 2 years that he used his his weapon to and to use lethal force against someone. So a lot of attention on him. But at the same time, I think Officer Krisha now is going to have to determine whether or not he wants to go forward with his case to trial, or whether or not his defense may approach the state to try to resolve it, but in some other way, like a plea. But at the same time, keep in mind that the way these cases are viewed, not only by police, we've seen that in this case, by prosecutors, by jurors, that Officer Krisha could roll the dice and say, no, I will go to trial. And a different jury could look at very, very similar facts and come up with a completely different verdict. So that is the calculation that he and his attorneys are going to have to make in coming weeks.
Let's talk about what happens now. Malia mentioned the appeal has already been set in motion.
Yes.
There's a chance he could be out of prison for a while before all of this legal posturing takes place. What do you expect? How do you expect this to play out now that the officer has been sentenced?
So under Texas law, a defendant is allowed to be out on bond if they were sentenced to less than 10 years, as Officer Taylor was. And so because of that, he is going to be out on bond while his appeal goes to a higher court. That higher court will have to decide whether or not to grant an appeal, potentially order a new trial. But if the court says no, there is no legitimate grounds for appeal, he would then potentially have to, at that time, report to prison. And so that is something that is going to be playing out again over months, possibly even years. And I do just have to say, because this has been on the minds of so many people following this case, is whether or not there could be intervention by Governor Greg Abbott with some sort of request for clemency from the Board of Pardons and Paroles. Too soon to know if that's going to happen. The governor's office has not addressed it, but I do want to mention that because that is in the conversation within the criminal justice community.
Interesting.
All right, senior reporter Tony Plahetsky, thank you so much.
Thanks, Tony.
You bet.
And again, we want to remind you that Officer Taylor was not the only officer charged in connection with De Silva's death. Austin Police Officer Carl Krisha was also charged with murder and deadly conduct, and as of right now, his trial date has not been set. And Taylor had also previously faced a murder charge in this case, but before his trial started, prosecutors ended up deciding to just pursue the lesser charge of deadly conduct, so they may end up doing the same with Officer Krisha. And as more reaction to the sentence comes in, we'll bring you the latest on air and online at KVUE.com.
In other news today, a new study is shedding light on the impact of Senate Bill 17, a Texas law banning diversity, equity, and inclusion offices at state institutions.
The Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board released its inaugural study over the weekend. And state lawmakers passed SB 17 back in 2023, forcing universities to close DEI offices and lay off staff. Now, the data in the study is limited and only from 2022 and 2023, but it will be the baseline for future studies.
KVUE's Daniel Perot is digging into the data and tells us which students the study says are being left behind.
In its inaugural report, the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board highlighted gaps in gender and race related to student success.
If we're seeing a gap, how is taking away support going to help that?
Emily Witt with the Texas Freedom Network says they're glad to have this baseline data.
Now that we've eliminated those support systems, we really expect that we'll see that data only get worse.
The study shows female students graduate at higher rates than male students. The gap is deeper with African American students. According to the study, 29% graduated in 4 years, compared to 53% of white students and 64% of Asian students. And when it comes to grade point average, slightly more female students had above a 2.0 GPA at four-year colleges. African American students are at 77%, outpaced by Asian students at 93% and white students at 91%. Witt says the data shows how important DEI programs and offices are.
I think the data from this report already shows us that there's a lot of work to be done to make sure that students of color, students from Black communities, really need to have community and connection on college campuses.
Supporters of the bill say the study shows African American students lagged behind and DEI programs were not working to begin with. Witt disagrees.
We're an incredibly diverse state, and we need to be able to train students from diverse backgrounds to thrive and build careers here.
The board plans to put out a new study on the impact of the bill every 2 years. For a more granular analysis, the study's authors say they want to further examine the interaction between gender and race in student success. In Austin, Daniel Perot, KVUE News.
Daniel, thanks. The city of Kyle is lifting certain water restrictions.
Now that's after about a year of those constraints and requests for conservation.
KVUE's Matt Fernandez joins us live from Kyle with how the city was able to make the changes and how residents there are feeling today. Hi, Matt.
Hi, Brian and Quita. Yeah, residents are happy about the announcement. Before that announcement, they were unable to power wash their driveways or wash their cars with hoses. Now they can. This is something Buck Turnage hasn't been able to do for a while.
Feels good, man. Long time coming.
Turnage and other Kyle residents were under a stage 3 water restriction for about a year.
Having the water restriction lifted is awesome. It's been tough, especially this being such a new neighborhood. The young lawns need a lot of water, and so those restrictions have hurt us. But just not being able to power wash our houses, the cars, having some of those things lifted, just so we can do more at home. I mean, it makes a lot of sense.
Those restrictions lifted Monday, city leaders say in large part because residents followed the rules and conserved.
That's one of the things I love about Kyle is just the community feel, right? If they ask us to do something, we're going to do it, especially if it's for the betterment of the community.
Huge. Yeah, we ask a lot of our residents, and it's just because of the drought.
Mike Murphy is Kyle's director of water utilities. Says they're able to relax some of the restrictions as they get into the cooler parts of the year. City currently gets water from sources including the Guadalupe Blanco River Authority and the city of San Marcos, which provides 500 acre-feet per year. But Murphy says they'll get a whole lot more water with the deal with Alliance Water starting in February.
It's going to provide us an additional 21% of what our current capacity is, which is big for the city of Kyle. And then in 2027, we've got an additional 2 million gallons coming in per day. And we're working on the take points for that right now.
And avoid losing water to leaky infrastructure. Crews currently working on piping and a storage tank.
The way Kyle's growing, we're not getting any smaller, and it's growing at a rapid pace.
Murphy says the city hasn't set new water rates for customers yet, but residents will see a water rate increase.
We're good. We're working hard on water.
Trying to add more water resources in a city that's growing and changing. And once again, that deal with Alliance will go into effect in February. Reporting live in Kyle, Matt Fernandez, KVUE News.
Good information, Matt. Thank you. Coming up, the Austin Gamblers, your 2024 Professional Bull Riding Team Champions. Sports Director Jeff Jones joins us live from a celebration happening in downtown Austin today. That's coming up in just a few minutes.
And we'll show you how art is meeting architecture in Leander's ambitious new North Line development. KVUE News at 5. We'll be right back.